In this solo by Tracy Thomas, we have an overlapping double vertical rhythmic motive. You know this motive because you've played it on snare drum. It's basically just a flam tap motion. However, on the marimba, we can't actually hear a flam. Both of those double verticals need to strike the instrument at the exact same time. Musically, we can also use the flam tap concept. I don't actually want to hear all three of the eighth notes in each of the hands at an even dynamic. It's helpful musically if you give a little bit of an emphasis on the first one and the other two kind of follow like a bouncing ball. This gives kind of a movement to the piece that adds a dance-like feel to it and keeps it from sounding too metronomic and even. This is how I do not want it to sound, with a lot of flams and with really even eighth notes. There aren't very many single independents in this piece, but when they do occur, they're kind of tricky. You need to play these single independents right after you play a double vertical stroke. That means the X stroke concept is a little harder to do. So as you've seen me play it, I play the double vertical here and I move my single independent out away from my body to get that sound right. What you see me doing is reaching around the double vertical so that I can get the best beating spot for my single independent note on the E. If I tried to do an X stroke with a double vertical, I will probably flam the double vertical. So it's best to use that weight shifting on your left foot to move up and around, strike the single independent that way, and you'll have time to get back for your next double vertical. The same thing happens in measure 13. You start with a double vertical, therefore it's easiest to move around that double vertical for the single independent. Since you're already in that motion, it's easiest just to finish the lick in that position. I'm going to play measure 13, and you will see that I have time to move my weight over to my left foot for the single independent stroke, and then I'll have plenty of time to come back for the double vertical. In measures 23 through 30, we have kind of a roll development passage. It's not at a fast enough tempo for it to actually create duration, so we're not going to call it a roll, but it's getting close. One of the ways that you'll want to begin to practice this is to just play the chord involved in one measure all at once. So you could play all of measure 23 as double vertical strokes together first. Then, when you feel comfortable, go ahead and split the hands with the left hand starting first. If you'd like, you could do this with each measure until you get comfortable. This passage may feel a little awkward at first simply because you are always starting with the left hand. You might want to hear that right hand as the downbeat of the measure, but you really need to practice hearing and feeling the left hand as that downbeat. This piece is in A-B-A form, and all that means is the first section and the last section are very similar. The only changes are in the last couple of measures. The music that you see on page 60 is just like what you saw on 58. In this last section, the only difference you're going to see is in the last 3 bars. There's just a couple new notes as compared to the first A section, so make sure you learn these new notes and just don't assume it's exactly like it was presented in the first section. We just have a couple articulation symbols that you may or may not have seen before that I wanted to mention. There's a retard symbol, which means you're just going to slow down that second to last measure. And then on the last measure, you see a horizontal line under the notes. That's called a tenuto marking. And all that means is to add a little bit more weight to the stroke, which will turn into a little bit of volume, but sometimes it's a different volume than an actual accent. An accent, we usually get our volume by height, and with a tenuto marking, we usually get our volume by weight. So when you come to that tenuto and the breath mark right before it, take a little bit of time and just slow your stroke down at the bottom so there's a little bit more weight, and it will sound different from your other sounds.